So I appreciate that ad. I think you picked up. We had people of opposing views that, of course, everyone knows a Heineken will indeed transform the world and all of our views. I'm not quite sure I believe that. In fact, oftentimes when you have too many Heinekens, it does not lead to positive conversations, so I want to make that clear. But it is an interesting ad, and in fact, it's an ad that I saw the same week, which was just a couple of weeks ago, when the news flash came across that there were some congressmen practicing for a baseball game. Did you see that? And someone came with a gun, a man came with a gun, and asked the question. The question was, is this the Republican or the Democrat team? He found out it was the Republican team, and he started shooting. I don't know about you, but that troubles me. It troubles me that we are living in a nation today where decisions are made on words like Republican or Democrat. Ironically enough, lots of decisions are not made around that, but people are making pretty poor decisions around that. Well, I have to say that I believe we, as people of faith who gather in this place here today, need to take this opportunity to bridge the gap. Not only us, but I would recommend our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, Baha'i, people of all faiths, need to start living the example that indeed we may not think alike, but we can all love alike. That statement comes from our founder, John Wesley. John Wesley said this. He said, "Though we cannot think alike, may we not love alike? May we not be of one heart, though are not of one opinion? Without all doubt, we may, herein all the children of God may unite, notwithstanding these smaller differences." I think that is a beautiful statement. For a new United Methodist Church, that is what John Wesley said a long, long time ago, and it rings true today for those who find home at the garden. We may not think alike, but indeed we can all love alike. It wasn't only Wesley, but Wesley followed the example of a couple of guys in the New Testament as well. One of these is Jesus, and Jesus gave us a way of dealing with conflict and finding ways to bridging gaps. In the Matthew's Gospel, the 18th chapter, and this is the Message translation, Jesus says, "If a fellow believer hurts you, go and tell him. Work it out between the two of you. If he listens, you've made a friend. If he won't listen, take one or two others along, so that the presence of witnesses will keep things honest, and try again. If he still won't listen, tell the church. If he won't listen to the church, you'll have to start over from scratch. Confront him with the need for repentance and offer again God's forgiving love. Offer again God's forgiving love." So that's Jesus' example. And what's interesting is in this next text, we have our buddy Paul, who actually tries to show how you can put those actions, put this plan into action with these two women. Their names are Euodia and Syntyche. Yeah, whatever. Some Greek name. Name your kid Syntyche. Anyway, and what he does is he tries to put into context how it is that you can put Jesus' message into play. Here are these words from Philippians. He says, "My dear, dear friends, I love you so much. I do want the very best for you. You make me feel such joy, fill me with such pride. Don't waver, stay on track, steady in God. Pray about everything. I urge Euodia and Syntyche to iron out their differences and make up. God doesn't want his children holding grudges. And oh yes, Sygus, since you're right there, help them work things out. Do your best with them. These women worked for the message hand in hand with Clement and me, and with the other veterans, worked as hard as any of us. Remember, their names are also in the Book of Life." The Book of Life is referred to in Revelation, and I guess it's that special place where people's names are in life eternal or the eternal realm. So what I find so interesting is he makes it a point to say this conflict is not so great that God isn't going to allow their names to be in that book. Today, as I mentioned before, we're going to look at how we can be bridge builders in conflict. How we as people of faith can find a way to bring a voice of love in a divided world. Now, perhaps you do not hold the belief that today this world is divided, but I do believe there is something in here for you as well. I mean, consider the last time you were in conflict, or maybe you're in conflict with someone right now. I believe that these steps that were given from Paul and Jesus and Wesley will serve us well as we continue forth. Will you pray with me? God of grace and love, to you we give thanks for this day. Fill our hearts to overflowing with the power of your love, a love greater than logic can understand, a love that can and will transform the world. Amen. It's hard to believe it has been indeed 25 years since the LA riots. Can you believe it? 25 years. So if you remember what happened, there was a man named Rodney King, was pulled over by police. This is when the video phone or whatever was first becoming popular, and it was documented that this man was beaten by police. Not only was it documented, but the police went on to be accused of the crime, and eventually what happened was they went to court, and the 4 officers were acquitted for their charges, of their charges. Do you remember what happened? LA erupted. The community absolutely erupted to the point where they had Rodney King come on TV and say, "Can't we all just get along? Can't we all just get along?" Well, the truth about life is we are not really wired to get along. Yes, according to this guy, Douglas Knoll, a lawyer and a conflict mediator and the author of a book that will be released in the fall, which I pre-ordered it because I love this. It's called De-Escalate, How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less. He says that we're really not wired to get along. Why? Because our brains first move to an emotional place before they move to a logical place. He believes that we are 98% emotion and only 2% logic. Now, I don't know if I believe that only 2% of our being is rational, but I think it's an interesting concept. We naturally lead with our emotions, and logic comes later. Daniel Goldman puts it this way. He says, our emotions have a mind of their own, one which can hold views quite independently of the rational mind. Knoll concludes that in order for us to continue to try to bridge gaps, in order for us to continue to try to be peacemakers and bridge builders, we must take into mind that we are first emotional beings who lead emotionally. As people of faith, we are first called to care about one another. As United Methodists, we do indeed believe that we don't have to all think alike, but we can all love alike and lead with love. I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give the world today is leading with love. Why can't we get along? Well, we know the biology of that now. But the truth is, once we identify that, we can find ways to indeed get along by following Wesley, Jesus, and Paul's messages. There are so many challenges in communicating today on so many different levels, aren't there? I mean, there's models. The model of Jesus' face-to-face communication is now hampered by text and cell phones and all of these different things. In fact, something tells me if it had been a face-to-face conversation, this cake would not have been written this way. It says, "Best wishes, Suzanne. Underneath that, we will miss you." Think about it. Okay. Go, yep. I think anyway. I think what happened was somebody called this in and someone took very literally what the person said. I think what we have to do is to be mindful of the way we communicate. And we have to be mindful that we communicate in ways today that we first lead with, "This is what I need to say." When you send an email, when you send a tweet, when you send an Instagram, when you send an emoji, whatever it is you saying, "This is what I need to say." So oftentimes we write with logic leading, never pausing to be mindful that the one who is receiving the message is starting not with logic, but with emotion. So oftentimes, emails and communication that is not face-to-face gets so misinterpreted because somebody's sending in logic and somebody's receiving in emotion. Clearly, those two women in the story, Euodia and Syntyche, were not getting along very well. We can assume that at one time they were close friends and things were working together. Now, what's interesting to me is as Paul shares this story with us, he never identifies the problem. But something's happened, hasn't it? Somehow communication has been lost, not via email, but somehow communication has been lost between these two people, and there is a visible disagreement that's showing up. In fact, it's showing up in such a way that the community is becoming divided, it seems, and it's having an impact on the greater community. So Paul is trying to find a way to deal with this conflict. I think we've all been in these kind of situations before, haven't we? Where conflict arises and nobody takes time to deal with it, and then it just kind of sticks there. And it becomes this shadow that hangs over everything. It could be a conflict within a family, and suddenly every family event or every celebration has that one little shadow of an experience hanging over the whole of the event. Conflict often is because we aren't willing to act. It can happen in marriages, it can happen with teenagers, it can happen with in-laws. Conflict can paralyze people and life. But look what Paul does, and look what Jesus recommends in dealing with the conflict. First, do you notice that Paul never even named the conflict? He never said what was wrong in his letter. Instead, he praises them for the work that they have done and the amazing people that they are. I think what he's saying to them is, it doesn't matter what the conflict is, let's just get over and get on with it, because we have important work to do. You know, when we take time to name our conflicts, sometimes it happens that someone is right and someone is wrong. In my house, someone is right and someone is often wrong. That's not really how it works, though. See, conflict can be worked out when we focus on what the desired outcome is. And remember, we decided as United Methodists, we're leading with love. I'm married to a United Methodist as well, by the way. And that indeed, it's not about who is right or who is wrong, because if you think about it that way, somebody's going to be left out and somebody's going to be in. But life doesn't work that way. See, we're all connected. We're all part of this life thing. And indeed, if we work towards the end of love, then the conflict ends up being something else, and you get to get on with it and get over it. I know a lot of right people who are right, and I recognize they're often lonely. Instead of focusing on what's right or wrong, let's just focus on God's goodness in life. You know, Paul does say these women, the conflict isn't enough to get their name taken out of the book. He reminds them that they have a greater purpose in life. He reminds them that their cause in life is greater than this little conflict, and that indeed they are transforming the world with the love of God. So let's get back to it. A number of years ago, I had an opportunity to go on a work trip. We were in Jamaica, I think. And it was one of those work trips where you had a limited amount of space to put people. So what we had to do is we had to create roommate situations. And we had very, very limited rooms. And we had a lot of people on this trip. So we went ahead and made up these room situations and asked people just to room together. There were two men on this trip. One was, and these two men were very much like the people in the ad today, on opposing sides of a particular issue. One was anti-gay. He believed homosexuality was a sin. If you asked him, he'd tell you that. if you said you believed otherwise, he told you were wrong. You know, the guy, this is that guy. It's not Adam and Steve. It's Adam and Eve. He was clear on his belief. Well, it just so happened that the only person I didn't have a roommate for was a hairdresser in town who had been with his partner for some 20 years and identified as gay. When the man discovered that the hairdresser was his roommate, he immediately came to me and he said, "I have to be moved. I have got to be moved." I said, "Okay, you'll have to sleep by the pool because we don't have any other rooms. I can't do anything about this for you." He said, "Yes, you can." So I went to the hotel person and I tried to figure it out, and it just so happened that they had this honeymoon suite that had like 2 rooms and was very, very expensive. And this guy may have believed, but his pocketbook was important to him too, and he was not going to pay for that room. So what happened? He ended up having to share a room with the hairdresser. Not only that, but let me tell you, one of the reasons why we put these guys together is they both had some experience hanging drywall. And that was one of the jobs that we had to do that week, was to hang some drywall. So not only did they get to sleep together at night, but they worked together all day long. And you know what? We were hoping to get 1 room in this house done. These 2 men drywalled the whole of that house in 1 week. One evening when we had gathered for the evening, right long before we left, the one man stood and said, "I need to tell you something, that God has changed me on this trip. I'm not ready to march in any pride parades or anything like that, but God has changed me." He went to the other man and said, "I have a new friend. I have a dear friend. This person means the world to me now." And you know, when we got back, the friendship continued, and they even shared in different places about their differences and how they were able to overcome their differences because they had a common work project that they were able to participate in and make a difference in the world. Talking makes all the difference. It takes courage to have a willingness to talk to somebody you know you don't agree with. It takes courage. With that said, if you lead with love, that courage will lead you to positive relationships like these 2 men. If we allow our personal disagreements to become a grudge, if we can't forgive each other, then we divide the body. We do immense danger to this thing called the gospel. We can't transform the world if we are not willing to lead with love. If you are in conflict right now, let me encourage you to deal with it today. Settle it today before it hardens your heart. Follow Jesus' example to go to the person, not to tell them that you are right and they are wrong, but to remind each other that you are children of God, made with goodness, who can lead with love. That you are people greater than God's love in you is greater than your limitations and conflict. Take that hurt and transform the world with love. If you've been hurt by someone, or if you've hurt someone, apologize. Avoid making excuses or giving reasons for your actions. Just admit you're wrong, admit it, acknowledge that you have hurt someone, and say you're sorry. And then accept someone else saying they're sorry to you. Change what you can about yourself and commit to lead in love and not hurt others. Ask for forgiveness and offer forgiveness. Why can't we all just get along? Well, my friends, we can. If we keep Jesus and love at the forefront of our relationships. We are indeed emotional beings, quick to emotional reactions. Let's commit to that emotion being love. Love, which will lead us to an openness of grace and the power of possibility. Amen.